So it's Rory Grogan.
Rory Grogan is standing with the ball in his hands. He's facing the town end, facing that iconic Clonus Hill, down to the Cretan Hotel that was floating in a sea of orange before this game. Armagh used to run this town, but they haven't had a permit since 2008, and now their biggest rivals are trying to take it off them again. Now Michael McKernan is trying to get in Grogan's way, get into his eye line, get into his head. David Goff is over telling McKernan to get out of the way. Grogan doesn't care. There's no one in his way. He steps up beside the two of them, drops the ball onto the most reliable left foot in the game, and before it has even left his boot, he's smiling. Armagh have already laid siege on Dublin, and now they want to address matters closer to home. Now they're in a third successive Ulster final, and still, every win, it somehow means as much to that orange mob that's bouncing on the hill. When you look at them doing that, coming from behind, beating bookies odds again, rolling on and on and on, you wonder, why are more people not talking about this team as the real deal? I'm joined by Dick Clerkin and Pat Spillane. And Dick, I'll put it to you, if Tyrone had beaten Armagh on Saturday, that would have been validation for everyone who's trying to talk Tyrone up as being all-Ireland contenders. Armagh beating Tyrone hasn't seemed to change anything in anybody's minds.
Some intro for Armagh from a hardcore Derry man, Conan for starters.
Well, they beat Tyrone.
I don't care, right? To take your wins where you can get them these days. Listen. I think I don't know. My appreciation for Armagh has gone up tenfold. I was one of the group last year that was sort of questioning their merits, basically on their CV, without any medals or any real pedigree or big game wins to sort of back up their ambitions. They hadn't that, but that's all changed in terms of the run that they went in All Ireland, the manner in which they acquitted themselves in Division 1, and just the depth, I suppose, is the big thing now. Whatever about, obviously, they have a lot of players now with an All Ireland medal in their pocket, which they mightn't have thought they were going to get last year, strangely ahead before they've got any other medal, let's be honest. But now they're winning games, big games, with a lot of those players on the bench, which, you know, with the way the championship is played out there, only the teams with that depth, and we'll come to Dublin in a minute, that don't have the equivalent will survive, and it was been able to draw on that and sort of get over the line and get the job done against Tyrone at the weekend, which sort of again furthers their right to be up in that top 4 now. We're probably Dublin. I would have said it was a big 5. It's now probably a big 4 plus 2 or 3 that they're rightly up there. They were unquestionably the better team. If Tyrone had won that game at the weekend, it would have been a bit of a robbery. When you look at the stats, when you look at the general play, there'd be question marks. Why did they go to sleep for that period in the second half and let Tyrone in? Because it was only sort of reliant on a few players like Sim McKernan, McGeary, young Michael Hone coming off the bench, when really an awful lot of the other Tyrone players were sort of passengers, really, in terms of their input on the day, and they were so paltry on kickouts. So I think, listen, it's a good place to be for Armagh at the minute. They're building a panel, building a team, and they've rightly going into a final in 2 weeks' time. I don't know what the bookies are. I'd say it's 50-50, but they'll want that Ulster title. Like they got an All-Ireland title, which is the Mecca. But you've seen the Armagh crowd that turned up in Clonus at the weekend, and they know the importance of an Ulster medal over the history of the CV in Armagh football. So they will be gunning for that medal as much as anything else they have over the last number of years.
Yeah. Pat, do you feel like it's fair to say that we're looking for reasons to talk up Tyrone or Donegal, but when it comes to Armagh, we sort of look for reasons as to why they're not that good?
Not really. I don't know what the conspiracy theories you have, lads. Can I just state something, because the usual old social media warriors are out there, Spillane hates Ulster and whatever like that. And I just state for a start, while this game was a bit of a slow burner at the start, it turned into probably what was the game of the championship to date. And here's my rant. I mean, you had the clash of 2 of the last 4 All-Ireland champions, Armagh last year against the 2021 champions Tyrone. A huge match, huge interest, 2 of the big guns clashing, and it's not on terrestrial TV. It's stuck at 4:45 in Clonus, and the only place you can find it is on GA+. Talk about a marketing and a PR own goal that we cannot showcase two of our best Gaelic football teams playing this new game of Gaelic football, this exciting, attractive game of Gaelic football, which we should be showing to the masses. I was just looking at the stats. There were 7 rugby matches shown on terrestrial TV last week. 7 rugby matches. There was 2 live GA matches on terrestrial TV. They were the 2 Munster hurling championships. Now, I can say without fear of contradiction, the Armagh-Tyrone game was the best of the GA championship matches last weekend. And I say that proudly for the first time ever that I'm banging the drum for Gaelic football, which is very, very attractive. But I looked at RT had, guess what? 2 URC games. TG4 had a URC game. BBC Northern Ireland, who I thought would cover that, they had the England ladies playing France. I just think that should have been on terrestrial TV. It should have been at 7 o'clock, prime time viewing on Saturday night for the people to watch it. And that brings me back to the final, which is now going to be played at 5:25. Like, who dreamt up 5:25 on a Saturday in Clonus? This should be on Clonus on a Sunday afternoon, prime slot, the Leinster final, the Ulster final, and showcase the talent. But at 5:25, and I disagree with, I can see the problem. I know a problem. Okay, the problem with the Ulster final is they say the ladies' final has to be played, and if it was on Sunday, the ladies' final would be on at 11:30. But the ladies have made a big mistake anyway, because the ladies aped the men and went with the split season. If the ladies had stayed with their own season and played the All-Ireland finals in September, October, their attendances wouldn't be dropping. But anyway, my rant, I think this game should be on a Sunday. I really believe, and I can see where Jimmy McGuinness is coming from, right? The cost with so many matches and in such a tight spell, that the cost of Donegal supporters having to go maybe to Dublin. But I think this game should be on in Croke Park, 70,000 plus. It'll be on in Clonus, which means that a lot of Donegal families, a lot of young Armagh supporters will not be able to get to the Ulster final in Croke Park or in Clonus. So a brilliant match, a brilliant game. Armagh deserving a victory, but I thought a lost opportunity not to showcase 2 of our best teams in action. Rant over.
Oh, well said, Pat. Our GA coverage on Indo Sport is brought to you with thanks to AIB. AIB is at the heart of Gaelic games across both club and county, and in 2025 they're celebrating a decade of sponsorship, the All-Ireland Senior Football Championships. With this year's championship shaping up to be one of the most competitive in years, AIB is more excited than ever to bring fans closer to the action. Check out #the toughest for more. And Dick, it's a very good point from Pat there. I mean, it's great that he's trying to get Ulster football more mainstream. But if I was to tell you that there was going to be 45 scores in this game between Armagh and Tyrone, it was going to be separated by 1 point, the last kick of the game, after the hooter for a place in an Ulster final. I mean, Pat's right. Like that. Anybody would want to show that then on their TV. Like that you would know from me telling you just those bare facts that this is going to be a classic.
Yeah, and not to maybe go down a rabbit hole on that conversation. That came up last year, the year before, it come up next year again. The problem is we've just too many games. The rules and the structural changes has created more good games. So you're going to have more games. So it's all very often is retrospectively we talk about this. It's the good game at the weekend that we didn't see. We sort of have to wait till it's a good game. It was a dog of a game, and there would have been plenty, Pat, over the years, really poor Ulster games that we weren't crying on a Monday or a Tuesday that we didn't see. We've already had, and we're going to have lots of more good games now, thankfully, which is great for the game that we're not going to see. So that's a good problem to have now for the GA. How do we market our games better, that they're now a better product to market? So I think that's a challenge that people realise. It was easy enough to put a lot of these games sort of off screen because they were hard watch, and a lot of the Ulster games weren't great over the years. But thankfully that looks to be, touch wood, a problem that's been reversed. I think in terms of the game itself, Conan, like I tipped Tyrone. I tipped them at the start of the year because I thought, now it's slightly changed as the rule, especially the goalkeeping rule changed, that Tyrone had the sort of arsenal and type of players that really lended itself to the new rules, especially with the likes of Niall Morgan. And unfortunately, things sort of changed as the year went on. Not only did Niall's impact lessen, like at the end of the day, he won an All-Star last year, and it was primarily from his outfield exploits, not as his pure goalkeeping. And that was sort of highlighted at the weekend in terms of his deficiency on the kick-out, which at the end of the day is one of the goalkeeper's primary jobs, and that's something now I'm sure Tyrone will be looking at. He says, Niall, yeah, you're a good man to come out. We need to do better on the kickouts here. And it's not just on him, but at the end of the day, whatever bit was lost out the field, he put 2 or 3 over the end line. Like in a game that goes down to a point, these things are the sort of the grain of rice that tip the scales against you. So that was a huge error of deficiency for Tyrone, which I was very, very surprised about from Malachy. Knowing Malachy and knowing the management team there and the work that they've done with Monaghan in terms of kickouts and Rory Beggan, that they could be so poor at the top level. Like if Tyrone had just got parity, even 50-50 on their own kickouts, not even getting to the level that Ethan Rafferty did, which performance was phenomenal. Tyrone's winning that game. You know, if they had just got an average return on their own kickouts, they would have got enough possession that they would have probably converted those, all things being equal. So I'd say Tyrone are absolutely kicking themselves. They did not go into that game thinking that they'd be so poor on their own kickouts and give away so many of Armagh and still only lose it by the kick of the game and still not playing well. So I do still think there's more in Tyrone. Like the Cannibans were well marked. It was a tough day out for them. It just shows you that you know, when you get up to, as they call it, senior hurling, it's not club football. The likes of Rory and Dara, you know, they're going to need to find a way to get free, and they got caught a few times in possessions. That'll be a learning curve for them. So I think there's more in them, and they'll be disappointed that they left that one behind them in some ways.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the Armagh defenders were on it. I mean, Rory Canavan trying that sort of dummy that he has, just that's not happening. And Darragh Canavan, Tyrone are a point up, he's trying to clip it over just to make it 2 points, and Ross McQuillan's tackle on him just takes it off him. Tyrone work to score eventually, and then you're right, because then they win the next kick out. It's all square, and they win the kick out. I think it's Charlie O'Byrne.
Fine margins.
Yeah. So Patrick, how do you feel then? Because Ethan Rafferty, as Dick says, he's right. His kick, I think he only missed one kick out the whole game, and he's still having such a big impact out the field. Do you accept that when somebody like Ethan Rafferty, because he has such a great impact on it? But obviously there's an outfielder for Armagh then, haven't they? Sit back and watch him play. Well,
just a couple of things. You know, there's no doubt about it. Dick is becoming the Jonah of the Gaelic football punditry world, because now that's 2 weeks in a row. Monaghan he tipped to beat Donegal the week before, and last weekend it was Tyrone to beat Armagh. So, Jesus. So I think
coming close. I'll get one of these big players right. I bet big, Pat. I look for value.
Like it's interesting when you talk about Armagh, because like when you become All Ireland champions, you automatically, there's a target on your back that you're the fella, you're the team to knock off the throne. But the one thing about being All Ireland champions is it gives you belief. You've been there, done that. You have the All Ireland medal, and that's what I saw out of all the things last Saturday. I saw belief, because in the past Armagh tended to lose narrow games, and when they were 2 points down towards the end of the game and Tyrone had built up a bit of momentum, Armagh had the composure and the game management, and more importantly the belief to see out the game, getting the final 3 scores. What were the deciding factors? Obviously, there's no doubt about it. The kick out under the modern new game is vital. 96%, one kick out he missed in the entire game. And it wasn't the fact that he was kicking out to unmarked guys. He was just zinging them 50 and 60 metres. And what was brilliant about it was he was identifying the space, but there was great work rate, there was great runs by the Armagh. So 96% kick out was number one. The second was their attacking. They attacked 46 attacks, 35 attacks to Tyrone. The number of scorers, 11 different scorers by Armagh last Saturday. They had 13 against Antrim. Tyrone, on the other hand, had just 6 scores, and 14 of the 22 points came from McCurry and Canavan. I just thought their physicality, their fitness, their transition, there's a freshness to this team, because normally what happens with a team the second year, you go with the same team, you go with the same panel, you go with the same plan. 6 of the starting 15 in the All-Ireland only started last Saturday. Their transition play was brilliant. Like I said, kick-outs, attacking, physicality, turnovers. And yet, Tyrone, who were so on Tyrone, like their kick-outs, I think to 60% in the last 2 games for Morgan. Like that's poor stats, just over 60%. The second thing about Tyrone, and you never write this or talk about this with Tyrone, their defence. They were so passive in defence. And the one thing you associate with Tyrone is that swarm defence, that tigerish tackling, that in your face. They were very, very passive. And again, like you said, when it came to the attack, I just thought, I wasn't seeing a pattern. I wasn't seeing a game plan or whatever that. And yet you can't. I think they're improving. I swear to God. Would I write them off? No. I think they're an improving outfit. bear in mind, Derek Canavan is just coming back from injury. He'll be better the next day. And they did show character. You know, there was an 8-point turnaround to come to lead by 2 points. So would I be writing their season off on the basis of last Saturday? Absolutely not. Malachy O'Rourke has an extra couple of weeks to work with them again, and they'll be a serious threat to any of the teams in the knockout. But Ken, my final rant of the thing, and I swear to God, lads, the Kieran McGeeney incident has been bothering me all week, because when he kicked the sideline flag, and as a result of Kieran McGeeney, a guy on the sideline, not on the field to play, kicking the flag, Darren McCurry gets a 2-point free that gets Tyrone 2 points. And you'll start to say, this is bonkers. This is absolutely bonkers. Playing rules are playing rules. So what happens on the field of play should affect the field of play. What happens off the field of play should not influence what happens on the field of play. God forbid if in the All-Ireland final some member of the management team F's out a referee, kicks a water bottle, and suddenly the winning score in the All-Ireland final is being awarded for somebody kicking a water bottle on the sideline, not on the field of play. It's a bonkers rule, and it's wrong. Rant over.
No, I'm actually interested. We've got Eddie Brennan coming up as well in the hurling. I actually want to put that to him from a hurling point of view. It's like, imagine bringing this into that sport now, rather than the ref coming over and saying, "Here, cop yourself on," and we're going to.
Well, it begs the question, Conor, at a GA. So let's put the hurling and football under the same GA umbrella. Yeah. As rightly says, Pat said, this isn't a Gaelic football playing rules issue. It's a GA discipline issue. Yeah. Why does the same rules not apply to hurling managers as football? Yeah. If it's dissent and referees, there's no argument against that. So either bring the hurling ones into line, and if they don't want to, take it away from the football managers, because there's no argument there to sort of say that GA football managers are worse than hurling managers. So we have to have a different set of rules. I think that they got away in the smoke with that one. If that had cost the game, which it very nearly did, that's what we'd be talking about. We would be talking about that more so than Meath beating Dublin. Like Kieran McGeeney, could you imagine what would have happened after that game if that had caused? Like, do we want to see that happening again? I think they've come out with a few directives. Sorry, Pat, a few directives around rule, too many steps, head high challenges. I think there's an opportunity to have a wee look at that before it becomes a big issue, because we've called it out as a rule anomaly from day one, and it was the first time it was laid bare at the weekend, and that's not helping, which is otherwise a very positive narrative around the rules at all.
Yeah.
Actually, and I know, speaking about instances, I looked at the 4 matches over the weekend, and I watched all 4, and all 4 were very, very enjoyable games, really enjoyable games. Even the Down-Donegal, with 10 minutes to go, Shea Miller had scored the goal, game on. But I enjoyed all 4 matches. But, I was thinking about all the games, and I was looking, was there any particular incident in the game that actually possibly cost the team victory? And I was thinking back again to this game, the Armagh-Tyrone game, and Ethan Rafferty's tackle or non-tackle. And you start to say, this was, I thought, a black card. If Goff had made the decision correctly, I would have felt this game would have turned in Tyrone's favour. This mistake, which I believe by David Goff, possibly cost Tyrone the game, because Armagh would be down to 14 men, and we now know under the new rules what an extra man can do. And you know what? And I'm wearing my old Sunday game hat, and the Sunday game in the past was one of those iconic programs that drove the agenda for the week. And the main talking point was, I felt, out of the football championship match, was Ethan Rafferty incident. And while they discussed it, they had actually no pictures of it, which I thought was absolutely bonkers. So, that was the one, I think podcasts and TV programs and whatever, it's our responsibility to highlight incidents and to set agendas for, and certainly there's no doubt about it, David Goff made a mistake and possibly cost Tyrone a place in the Ulster final.
Yeah, it was. Enda McGinley just mentioned it on the Sunday game, and it was sort of a passing sort of debrief after it all, and that was such a big thing, because Goff is obviously, if anything about Goff, he knows the rules inside out. He applied them with Kieran McGeeney. I'd say with the Peter Hart thing, people were complaining about that, but he would say that wasn't shoulder to shoulder. He's clashed into his body.
But that was a foul.
He put him to the ground. Yeah, so he was.
How do you look at those two big plays, the Rafferty and the Hart start one and sort of say one is a free and one is a... They're both sort of, they're not sort of clear cut, but, as you say, one ultimately decided the game. Well, either could have decided the game, but the both of them fell in Armagh's favour.
Yeah.
So maybe it balanced out, because I do think that 2 points that Tyrone got for the McGeady incident shouldn't have been there. So maybe on the balance of play, Armagh got and they were the better team on the day. So
you couldn't say that, Dick, though, because 10 minutes with a man down would have a major.
No, they wouldn't have. Yeah, they wouldn't have got the chance to get that equaliser. I would have said Tyrone were kicking on because they were getting a bit of energy at that stage. Yeah.
Just finally on Armagh, we are waxing lyrical about the forward play and the depth of the squad, and there's such honesty about all the runs that they make, and they make themselves available for every player on the ball. I look at them sometimes, Pat, even before they won the All-Ireland last year, they would have been the team that, if you're in coaches' WhatsApp groups, everyone's sharing through clips of Armagh, look what they're doing here. They look like one of the best coached teams in Ireland, and obviously McGeady has assembled this great team around him. But if you look at the last 4 or 5 years of what he's done, how he's built now the success and the consistency, tell me who is a better manager in Ireland than Kieran McGeady?
Well, the winners write the narrative. So as long as you're winning, the narrative is you're the best manager. I mean, if God forbid Armagh have a turkey of a game and lose their crown, well, then the narrative will change. But like you said, I mean, as George Hook used to say to Bill O'Herlihy, back up the wagon there a bit. It was an impressive display from Armagh. They were deserving winners, there's no doubt about it. But you start to look at the stats and I'm saying, right, 2-pointers are vital. When they had the wind in the first half, they scored 1 2-pointer out of 6 attempts. They scored no goal, absolutely no goal. This is 1 goal in 2 championship matches. And it was something I highlighted after the Antrim match. They tend to create goal-scoring opportunities, but tend to take the easier option. So, like I said, it wasn't a flawless performance by any means. They had a struggling first half against Antrim. Certainly the third quarter last Saturday against Tyrone, when Tyrone outscored them, was a poor third quarter. What got them over the line is the composure, the management. And yes, you're right. I mean, McGeady, there's no doubt about it, has assembled a brilliant management team. And people talk about, remember my late great friend Paddy O'Shea talked about that grain of rice that can tip in your favour. And last year, I felt it was the addition of Conleth Gilligan to Armagh's team was that grain of rice, because Conleth Gilligan's forte and was working on Armagh's transition play. And Armagh in transition are brilliant. They're powerful runners, and they have all the attributes for the modern game of athleticism, of physicality, of powerful, strong running.
They have what they are as well. They're supremely conditioned.
Yeah.
Like you look at them, and I've been a few things in Armagh over the last couple of months and coaching courses, and you'd sort of run into it. You just look at these guys, and that's the same for every inter-county player, but Armagh especially seem to be so well conditioned. And what he has done is, and this is probably where the criticism and there's maybe the question mark over Armagh last year. They have a lot of players, and I don't want to be unfair, that probably technically aren't as good as maybe their Kerry equivalent, but he is getting the best out of them because they're so supremely fit and conditioned and organised. So these guys are all, there's a very high base for that Armagh team, because they're always, once the work rate is up and the endeavour there, they will stifle so many teams because they're collectively so good. Now they still need the sprinkling of class in the likes of Campbell, O'Neill, Ilan Jarliogue. I do personally think missing Rian O'Neill will come to bear its teeth come the end of the year, because those sort of marquee players, like at the end of the day, not to go back on their own, they didn't have to do an awful lot more, playing maybe a 7 out of 10 to win that game. So that's a sort of a marker of concern for Armagh. They sort of laboured a wee bit against Antrim as well in the first game. So I think, yes, they're going well, but there's a few wee markers there that they need to be mindful of as well going forward. And Pat says, been clinical in front of goals or scoring goals. As you get to the Whiteheath, Croke Park, better teams, you need to be sort of threatening goal more often. Like ultimately, it was that goal that won them in the All Ireland final. Barry McCambridge coming up. They're going to need to find those big scores from in their team as well as things pacing up.
Okay, I hear you. You're both telling me to back up the wagon. Message received,
yeah.
and trust me, one wagon that I've definitely had to back up is I tipped Dublin to win the All-Ireland, and now it's not looking too good.
That's why you come into this camp to get schooled.
Pat, it was unbelievable stuff for me. Obviously, it was a great day. I mean, the occasion, the game, again, dramatic, back and forward. I mean, Meath still have to score to get themselves over the line. It's not like they can just hang on. They have the big lead. Colour, again, noise. And I was looking at Matthew Costello, and I was thinking, put him in this category of players who are some bit of stuff. And I thought Pat Spillane would love that type of player as well. He reminded me a bit of Pat Spillane, who get the ball, carry it to loads of heart, loads of energy.
Yeah, he like, you know, Jimmy McGuinness had a mantra when the year they won the All-Ireland, and it was a 4-word mantra that he always spoke to his players before training sessions, before games, and it was 4 words: commit, focus, believe, achieve. And that's what you saw in a nutshell with Meath last week. In particular, belief. They believed they could beat the Dubs, but they matched that belief with hunger, work rate, intensity, high energy. And I looked at them in the first half, and they made brilliant use of the wind and got their 2-pointers and scored 17 points. But if you look at their stats, they also in that first half kicked 6 wides and 2 into the goalie's hands. But the key was their heads never dropped. Their heads never dropped. They truly believed they could beat them. And it was a deserved victory. And you thought when Dublin came back, in those closing stages, 2 points in it, momentum with the Dubs, Meath are going to blow it. But you know, they showed great composure, they showed good game management to get the final couple of scores again. So a great victory for Dublin. The greatest shock of all time? Not really. It was a big surprise, but a shock, no. Kerry being beaten by Clare in the Munster final in 92 was a shock. Kerry being beaten by Offaly possibly in the 5-0 was a shock. They were shocked. But like what I see with Dublin is, and I was that soldier with Micah, you're coming to the end of a great era. There's still a good hardcore of players with lots of All-Ireland medals in their pocket. And like what I admired about Dublin, like you look at professional sports teams and the more they win, the more they get paid, the more they get rewarded. Amateur sports teams, like in Gaelic football, the more they win, they get another medal. And I just admired what Jim Gavin and subsequently Dessie Farrell could do with the Dubs, that they were still so motivated year after year after year. But you know, going for the last hurrah is fraught with difficulty. The last hurrah for sports people usually ends in failure. I thought Jim Gavin left after the 6th row. Then I felt, you know, in 2023, when they did win another All-Ireland medal, some of them are going, and they still stayed on. And now they're going for probably the 3rd last hurrah. And just I felt last Sunday, physically and mentally, they were tired. They were tired. They didn't bring the same energy to the game, but what you didn't, it was more mental tiredness. And where was that reflected? It was reflected in they were very passive in defence, very un-Dublin-like in defence, but it was their decision-making, the amount of unforced errors, the lack of composure going down the final straight. You never saw that with Dublin teams. So, look, it was brilliant for the game. It was absolutely brilliant for the game. But what a miserable attention. 10,000. They should be. Portlaoise should have been full for that game. So, but you know, the Croke Park factor, people say, geez, it doesn't. Croke Park factor, taking Dubs out of Croke Park factor is a great leveler, because Croke, you know, the Dubs in Croke Park, they have their favourite dressing room, they have their set routine, they warm up in front of the Hill 16. All the things are stacked in their favour. When they come out the country to Portlaoise or to Auckland, not as happy, they're out of their comfort zone, and they were out of their comfort zone last week, and it was just great for the game of Gaelic football. Absolutely great.
It is a double whammy, the Croke Park factor, Dick, because, yeah, obviously Dublin are so used to it. Like, if you told any team that they were going to have to play in Kerry's home ground for all these big games, and Kerry are obviously going to have an advantage there, but it's also Croke Park, so it's like it's double, because the other team are coming into it and they're overawed, and it's bigger, the pitch is bigger, the stadium's bigger. It's completely different circumstance. And yeah, like, I'm not saying this is the only reason that Meath beat them, but it definitely, as Pat says, has a factor in it.
It is like when you get an upset like that. It was a big upset where it ranks. Everyone can sort of have their own opinion. I'd feel Monaghan had a few up there in terms of upsets over the years to rank up there. But when you look back on them, there's markers. There's that sort of perfect storm scenario. It's not one thing that caused it. So yeah, the venue was one, right? So that had an impact. Like, Meath have been trending well. Like they finished third in Division 2. They had a few very good performances. They probably sort of taper towards the end of the league, but they had been showing form. I was surprised how poor they were when I seen them against Monaghan in Navan, and I think that was a bit of an outlier in terms of how they're general. So they were trending quite well. So it wasn't just like a Meath team just turned up out of nowhere. Dublin have had a lot of markers that team, and I was listening to yourselves your podcast yesterday evening, Conan, talking about, but you're almost talking about Dublin teams don't do this, or don't Dublin teams, this Dublin team doesn't do what they done on Sunday. It's not the same Dublin team.
Yeah.
It's not, and you have to sort of, you have to stop comparing what the team that was there on Sunday with what was there in the preceding 10 years. Like the experienced players, and there are a number of experienced players you list through there, but they're older, and age impacts in terms of the energy levels. And I want to tell you that when you get to the end of the career, it does. Sometimes the energy just isn't there when you get into a dogfight. The hunger, are they still as hungry as they were when they hadn't all the medals that they have in their belly? It's very hard to be that hungry game on game. So that's the experienced players that are listed out that you should be expecting better. The Kilkennys, the O'Callaghan's, the Davy Byrnes, the Scullys, they're all... That's all the risk for them. And then the new wave of players that, unfortunately, and this is to be no slight, I'm not going to name any names, they're just not at the same calibre of the players that they're replacing. And that's been measured against an unfair high bar. But that's the bar that Dublin, any current Dublin team is going to be measured against. And they're just not the same team, and they're just not at that level. And there's still ability in them. And we said this consistently during the league. When that team turns up right, puts in a performance, they're as good as they can compete with any. But if they're off a wee bit, you've seen what we've seen against Armagh, you've seen what we've seen against Tyrone the last day, and it reared its head against Meath and Portlaoise. They're just a very, dare I say it, average team. And when I say average, they're outside the All-Ireland contenders if they're not at their game. So, listen, it's not a bad thing for Dublin. Like I always felt during those years when they were just steamrolling, that's not a normal experience for any Gaelic football player. You need to sort of go through days like that. It sort of adds to the tapestry of a career, because you get that feeling. Those players will be hurt, they'll be embarrassed, they'll be humiliated. But sure, we all got that. There was God, most of my career was that. Pat, you probably had far less than me, but you still had the experience that to sort of get into a dressing room and geez, they should be now cutting lumps of each other to try and get back out, and the first team that gets them in the qualifiers, I can't wait now to see how that Dublin team responds, because that's an experience for any team to go through, that humiliation of losing a game that they should have won. And it'll be interesting to see how they go. I wouldn't write them off. You're counting them out of the top teams yesterday, Conan. I think they're still up there, but again, it's about having their personnel available. But then when they're on the pitch, they're up to the pitch of the game. Their hunger levels, their work rate, their intensity is there. But if it's not, you can write them off. And they know that. They don't need me to tell them that. They know that, and there's enough to look back over just this year to demonstrate that.
Yeah, actually, not to give this podcast any headlines either, I'm not writing off the Dubs. Have the Dubs a chance of winning the All-Ireland this year? They have as good a chance as anyone, because, for one simple reason, there is the days of the invincible team like Dublin 6 in a row or whatever like that, they're gone. So there is no invincible team. There is no super team in this year's championship. Yeah. This is, I've said before, this is a very, very open championship. And you look at Dublin, at times they were very good in the league, coming from 12 points down against Kerry down in Tralee. They showed great character. Last Sunday again, look, they were well down at half-time. They showed great character in the second half, came to 2 points behind. To 2 points, and you look at who were they missing. They were missing Sean Buckler, who was the forward of the league, missing Shawnee McMahon, missing Cian Murphy, missing Lee Gannon. So that's 4 good players. So if they can bring that energy that you normally, which they didn't have last week, if they can bring back that energy to the championship, to the rest of the games in the championship, they still have a shout. But what's this for space? Wouldn't this be brilliant if Kerry win next week? who could they draw in the first match at home in Killarney? The third seed, and guess who's one of the third seeds? Dublin. Now, wouldn't that be some match?
I'd be ticket for Killarney, yeah.
Kerry versus Dublin in the All-Ireland Championship in Fitzgerald Stadium, Killarney. Now, that would be, wow.
I tell you what, if Derry end up in a group with Kerry and Dublin in it, I'm done. I'm not watching any more of this championship.
But like, would it be any more unlikely Dublin winning in 25 than it was Armagh in 24 or Tyrone in 21? Absolutely not. You know, anyone that says they can't is the same people a couple of weeks ago that Rory McIlroy would never win a major or another major or Masters. You know, there's the odds are as much in Dublin's favour to win one as not, possibly, when you look at the teams. But it's great, you know.
Sorry, I was just thinking, you know, the last in 1986 we won, and we sort of knew we were. We went on the All-Star Tour in 87 with the Kerry team. And you know, when you sort of had the belief that I think this is our last trip abroad, you know, this is it. And anyway, we said we'd milk it. And we had a brilliant trip in San Francisco. We drank, I remember, all day in the Fisherman's Wharf down in the Buena Vista pub. We missed the function that night. We played against the All-Stars on the Sunday, and we got it. And it was the only time Dwyer got cross with us. Dwyer insisted that we go training the following morning in a beach in San Francisco. And he had a 2-mile run out along the beach and a 2-mile back, 4-mile run. Bomber came second in the run because he hid behind a sand dune on the way out and he only had to run 100 yards. So Bomber was second. But the winner of the 4-mile run was the county board chairman, Sean Kelly. He was running in his sandals. Like, we should have known there and then, lads, the writing is on the wall. We hung on for another couple of years, and Dwyer hung on, and it was the only failing, one of the very few failings Dwyer had. Dwyer then believed in his last year, 1989, there's one last hurrah, and I remember he crucified us in training. Unfortunately, we had so much mileage in the leg, we left all our energy on the training ground, and we had no energy for the matches, and we bowed out easily out of the championship. So getting the last hurrah is a delicate balancing act.
Yeah. Like, we're all set Ulster or provincial championship wise. You have Kerry against Clare on Sunday. We have Mayo and Galway. Then obviously we have Donegal, who are joining Armagh in the Ulster final, and then joining Meath in the Leinster final is Louth. And like, this is obviously well set up. We're going to have to do a special episode on this 15 years on. But Louth are also, like, they're on their journey. They've built over a number of years. They showed that bit of consistency. I felt bad for Kildare. They actually played some really good stuff. Some, I think, old school stuff, like Aidan O'Rourke's in coaching them. Like, you get that ball into the full forward line there, like, stop messing around, get it on their side of your boot. But Louth had a bit of nous and knack to get through it. And like, I don't know who's going to win that game now, because I'm watching Meath against Dublin thinking, that full forward line's great, midfield's great, and Louth are a good team too.
It's great. I spent 8 years living and working in Drogheda, Colin. So when I in 2010 I was working in Drogheda, and wow. I still remember, I text several people on Sunday night. I says, God, I thought of them because they were so distraught. These are the Louth people. They were so distraught, like, genuinely. These were like Brenton McEntee. Shout out to Brenton if he's listening. Was so distraught over that, and carried that for a number of years, and it didn't sort of rest well, needless to say. And then the Meath ones, like, you couldn't listen to them there. So like Louth is such a passionate GA county. Like, there's a tradition there going back to when they were winning All-Irelands in the 50s, and that carries through. Like, so they're not huge in numbers, but they are really, really passionate. And obviously the Meath ones. Now, disappointing for Meath football that there were so few of them in Portlaoise. Like, great win, but like, there was 10,000 people there. I'd say 7,000 or 8,000 was Dublin. But listen, maybe that's just a symptom of the last effectively 15 years since they won that game, that they've just been beaten down. So they'll get a buzz. Like, I have an under-12 tournament in Crossmaglen that Sunday. I was going to go to that match only for it, because great occasion. Like, there'll be the build-up, the whole 2010. Like, but let's park that for a minute. This is Louth's third Leinster type final in a row. They have been a very formidable team. They are favourites. They should be favourites, just based on form. They've had the hoodoo sign over Meath over the last number of years, and I would dare say that's not a situation that probably rests well with Louth, because they have everything to lose. Whereas actually, now the pressure's on them. Imagine Louth now, if you'd have told them at the start of the year, after losing Mickey Hart, all of this, you're going to be going into the Leinster final as favourites, and the pressure of that to try and rewrite the script from 2010. So I feel sorry for Louth with that pressure, but what an occasion, what a situation that they find themselves in. So it'll be a great build-up.
Yeah, that's unreal. Pat, how far could either of these two teams go? Because we're talking about Dublin, Tyrone, off the back of losses. Obviously, they could still compete in the back end of the championship. But here are two teams that, I think, as banana skin, maybe a bit insulting to them, but I think any team, any of those All-Ireland contenders could do without meeting them further down the stretch.
Are you asking me would Louth or Meath win in All-Ireland?
I'm asking how far could they go?
They won't be winning in All-Ireland, but it's brilliant to see them in a Leinster final. And I can remember 2010 because I was actually working that day on the Sunday game. And when you're on the Sunday game, and a lot of opinion is very subjective, but when you get something that's so clear-cut, like the Joe Sheridan controversial goal, and you say, this is brilliant because everyone got this wrong. This shouldn't have been allowed. Martin Sludden should have given a free out. Everything is so wrong. And I thought, geez, this is great TV. And it was huge TV that night because it was the talking point. I always felt that Meath erred in not offering a replay out. I really, and you know what you also have to say, did they have any look out of it ever since? And they didn't, because Meath football has been in the doldrums. So I would love to see, I think it was 1957, the great accordion player Dermot O'Brien was the captain of the team that beat Cork. Louth, it was a cracking game, by the way. And you're right, Kildare in the first half, in the first quarter, they went 8-2 up, and their football was beautiful football, kick football, first time football, lovely diagonal ball, full forward, turning, shooting. And then, two things? Louth took over in the second quarter. 10-point turnaround, outscored Kildare 1-9 to 2 points. There was two things that stood out, I thought. Three individuals that they had, Sam Mulroy, Craig Lennon and Tommy Durnan, absolutely superb. But their experience of playing in a higher level for the last couple of years, of being to Leinster finals and playing in Division 2, I think stood to them, because particularly in those vital stages, and I'm thinking in particular of the last score and the last attack, Louth were hanging on. Kildare owned the ball in the second half, left 5 goal-scoring chances and should have been ahead. But Louth, a point ahead. But I thought their composure and game management, and they set up Tommy Durnan for an absolutely brilliant 50-metre point, a 2-pointer. So, it's a final that hopefully there'll be 60, 70,000 at it. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful occasion. The romantic in me would love to see Louth righting the wrong and Louth winning a Leinster that was probably robbed of them 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think as well in Louth's favour, whilst the pressure's on them, it'll be very difficult for me to get this to the same pitch that they did against Dublin. Like how many times over the years that we've seen a team put in a massive performance, maybe a game too soon, like the energy, the hype that they'll have got of that. Very difficult for what is largely an inexperienced team at this level to sort of dumb the hype and bring that same energy and intensity to the next game. You almost have they played their final a game too early from Meath's perspective. But listen, that's for them to deal with. That's a great place for Meath football to be in because they haven't been there too often over the last number of years. So, and you have to remember, give credit because listen, it wasn't a settled Meath camp in the lead in. So what happened with their management team or the backroom team stepping away a couple of weeks ago, that can turn a team one of two ways. You don't need to be told about that, Conan Doherty. When something happens in a team, it can either solidify and sort of bond a team to bring them, or it can go the other way. Unfortunately, that seems to have happened in Derry, and I've seen that happen in several other counties. It seems to have solidified Meath, and they sort of went out there in Portlaoise with a sort of grit in their teeth and a spit in their hand and got to work. And you know what? Fair play to Robbie Brennan and the Meath players for doing that, because it could have easily went the other way.
Yeah. Dick Clerkin, Pat Spillane, that was absolutely brilliant. Obviously the football has taken over. That is the sexiest thing of the summer, but we do need to talk about hurling, and we have Eddie Brennan waiting on the wing, so let's get over to him.